How's it going? Today we're going to talk about section 8, finish up this chapter 7. It's on special products or binomials. So what this really is some shortcuts. We make shortcuts for things that we do a lot or do often, and we also make shortcuts for easily recognized things. So these are a little bit of both, things that we run into a lot, and because they're easy to recognize, we make shortcuts for them. So here's basically what we're talking about. When we have something like this, x plus 4 squared, we have a binomial that's squared. In other words, we have the same thing, x plus 4 times x plus 4, right? Now, with all of these, let me start by saying we could keep using the FOIL method. The FOIL method is not wrong. It's going to get you to the same answer. But what I'm going to try to show you right now is when we see things like this, we might be able to get there a little bit faster. Okay, so we don't have to FOIL every single time. If we FOIL this, the first numbers give us x squared. Okay, the outside numbers give us 4x. And then the inside numbers give us another 4x. And then the last number is 16. Well, what ends up happening every single time when you have a quantity squared like this, that middle term, that 4x, it gets repeated. Okay? So that is the correct answer, that x squared plus 8x plus 16. But we can get there faster just by looking at it, because what ends up happening, no matter what the letters are, no matter what the numbers are, when you write that out, a plus b times a plus b, what you're going to have every single time is you're going to have the first number squared when you do the first, and then the outside a times b, and the inside, b times a or a times b, you end up getting that same thing twice. The outside and the inside will always be the same value when you multiply. And then you have the last, which would be b squared. So every single time, what you end up with is a squared, and then you have 2 of the ab's, and then you have b squared. So what we can basically do is we could have just looked right from here and said, I have an a value, I have a b value. That's going to equal that first one squared, so a squared or x squared. And then we take 2 of the product of those two. So we basically just take 4 times x and we times it by 2. So we multiply those two letters or numbers together, 4 times x, and then we just times it by 2. And that gets us straight to the 8x. And then we just take that second one squared. So it's just a little bit faster way of getting to the same answer. It also works when you have a minus. The only difference is when you FOIL that out and you have a minus b, we have a squared, and for our first, just like before, and then we have a times negative b, which is going to be negative ab, and we'll have another negative ab. But our last, negative times a negative, is still a positive, okay? So the only difference is that second one is going to be negative. So here's basically our rules, okay? So these are called perfect square trinomials. Whenever you see something like this, a plus b squared, all you have to do is take the first term, square it, multiply together, and then times it by 2. And then take the second one squared. And it works just like it's minus. The only difference is you have a negative sign there. Okay? So let's try a couple with that rule. Excuse me. All right. So if we have something like 3x plus 2y squared, yes, we could FOIL it out. Okay? Yes, you could take 3x plus 2y, 3x plus 2y, and you could FOIL that out. Okay? But what we can actually just do is go straight to the answer, because all you have to do is take that first term, the 3x, and square it. 3x squared would be 9x squared. Okay, and yes, that's exactly what you would get if you multiplied 3x times 3x. Then you multiply these two things together. You take the 3x and the 2y, multiply those together, and then you times it by 2. That's how we're going to get our middle term. So it's just going to be 9x squared. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. And then we have an x and a y. And then all we do is take that last term, that 2y, and we square that to get 4y squared. And that is how we get straight to the answer. It's just a quicker way of doing it. It's a shortcut, basically, is what we're doing. This one, we would have the first one squared, which is going to be 36x squared. We multiply these two together. 1 times 6x is still 6x. We times it by 2, so we get 12x. And then the second one squared. 1 squared is still 1. It's just a faster way of getting straight to that answer. Again, all you're doing is taking the 6x, squaring it. That's how you got that first term. To get the second term, you take the 6x times the 1, so multiply those two together, and then times it by 2. That's how we got the 12x. And then you just take the second one squared, and that's how we got the 1. Okay? So if we try the second one, or this other equation, we can get straight to the answer. First one squared, 16. Now this is minus, so the middle term is going to be minus. That's all you got to remember. We multiply these together. 4 times x squared is 4x squared. And we just times it by 2, which would be 8x squared. And then we just square the second. X squared squared. We know our product rule where we multiply. So we would get x to the 4th. It's just a fast way of getting straight to the answer. Okay? We make up another one real quick. It's just 5x plus 2y squared. First term would be, the first one squared would be 25x squared. The middle term, it's plus, so plus. We multiply these together, would be 2 times 5 is 10xy. Multiply that by 2 would be 20xy. Second one squared would just be 4y squared. So we could just get straight to the answer. Again, these are just shortcuts. We can't use the shortcuts for everything, but when we recognize something like quantity squared, we can use our perfect square trinomial rule, okay? Again, all it is, just to refresh, if you see plus or minus, anything squared, binomial, first one squared, you multiply the a and the b together, times it by 2. If this is plus, this is plus. If it's minus, this middle one's minus. And then it's just the second one squared, okay? Another shortcut we could run into. If you see something like this, x plus 4, x minus 4, and you're multiplying those together. Well, something interesting is going to happen every single time with these. When we FOIL this out, you get x squared. And then when we do the outsides, we get negative 4x. The insides, we get a positive 4x. And then we get a negative 16. Now, what ends up happening is those two terms will cancel each other out, leaving us just with x squared minus 16. Notice this only works when you have a positive and a negative, okay? The first term is the same, but then it's plus 4 and a minus 4, okay? Same thing is going to happen when we have something like this, 7 plus n, 7 minus n, okay? The first term is the same, and then the second term is the same value, but one's positive, one's negative. When we FOIL that out, we get 49 for our first, and then we got a minus 7n, and then on the insides we get a plus 7n. And then we get a negative n squared. So again, those middle terms cancel, leaving us with 49 minus n squared. This is what we call a difference of two squares. And we call it that because difference is minus. 49 is a perfect square, and the squared is a perfect square. So we name it actually after this part right here, and a squared minus b squared. But what this is if you ever see an a plus b and a minus b, so the first terms are exactly the same, the second term is positive, or the second term is the same value, but one's positive, one's negative, it will always FOIL into just that first term squared minus the second term squared. And that's all it will be. So again, we can use this shortcut, and we don't have to actually FOIL things out to do things like x minus 7, x plus 7. That answer is just going to be the first term squared minus the second term squared, and you're done. 4x minus 2y, 4x plus 2y. We don't actually have to FOIL these out. All we have to do is take that first term, square it. 4x squared would be 16x squared. We don't have to worry about the middle term because the middle term will always cancel each other out. All we have to do is square that second term. 2y squared would be 4y squared. And then we just put a minus in there, and you're done. All right. Again, these are just shortcuts for a couple special binomials that we run into a lot of. So try a few examples and let me know how it goes. Talk to you guys.